Good day. It is Wednesday, March 15th, 2023. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. Hope you caught the time all right. Is that time change, that wretched, stupid thing we do where we change the clocks twice a year? So as I've said on Twitter, my microwave is going to be 1 hour off now for 6 solid months. It gets frustrating, but it's still easier than learning how to program the thing. So yeah, we've got a good show coming up today. A lot going on. Good to see some of you commenting. What was that North Run Grader? Not sure if Cory's one of my most favorite, but I'd buy him a coffee. Okay, I'll take a coffee. You know, we don't get paid a hell of a lot around here. Coffee is well worth it for us. So, yeah, we got lots of news and items, of course, and as we've been tweeting, and I'm seeing people checking in, looking forward to it already. Tamara Lich is going to be on. Really been looking forward to this conversation for quite a while. Of course, she's had a hell of a year that she didn't anticipate, and the adventure is still ongoing. So we'll check in and talk for a little while on that. Going to be covering a lot of things, ranting and raving as usual as well. I just want to do a shout out to the Bison Association of Alberta. They had me and Jane over last weekend as a speaker at their convention in Camrose. It was fantastic. They're a great organization. You want some good local meat, guys, check out Alberta Grown Bison. It's fantastic. And yeah, Linda and Stephen were excellent hosts putting it all together. All right, I'm going to get on to what's got me worked up, something a little more domestic before we get into those broader issues and things. And that's what this... We're hearing it in the news lately with Alberta's recall legislation. So, I mean, there were many things that led to the collapse of support for Premier Jason Kenney, within his own base. And a large factor in that demise was his tendency to promise big and deliver small. And Kenney promised many things while running for the leadership of the newly formed UCP. He promised to shore up provincial autonomy within Canada and to stand up against Ottawa. Upon becoming Premier, Kenney struck the Fair Deal panel, which traveled the province for months talking to Alberta about how to change Alberta's relationship with Ottawa. The Fair Deal panel came back with a bunch of recommendations, and Premier Kenney didn't implement pretty much one of them. I think there were a couple of little things he did, but the big ones he didn't bother. It was just something to calm the people down. That was starting to frustrate a lot of supporters. And he also promised democratic reform, and that's a promise that made me perk up because I've always been a strong believer in direct democracy and political accountability. Now, Kenney did deliver on his promised democratic reforms, but he did it in a way even worse than not tabling legislation at all. The Kenney government created the Recall Act, but they purposely made it completely unworkable. And they did the same thing with their Citizens Initiative Act. What the Kenney government did in creating those acts was tell Kenney's former supporters, they're former now, I think you're stupid enough to accept this as a promise kept. Well, it turns out the supporters weren't that stupid, and Kenney is now a former premier of Alberta due to that. I mean, a bar has to be set to initiate a recall or a referendum. Fair enough, and it has to be fairly high. We don't need every elected person to be constantly fighting off recall campaigns, and we don't need a bunch of referendums held on trivial matters. The bar can't be impossible to meet, though, or the legislation's useless, and that's what the Kenney government set the bar at. They made it impossible. The reason we're hearing about it in the news now, even though this act is years old, is because the 18-month post-election waiting period to try and initiate a recall for municipal politicians has just passed. There's lots of people who have been eagerly awaiting the chance to recall municipal officials, and now they're looking into it and discovering they can't really do it. Think about it. To initiate a municipal recall in Alberta, a person or group has to garner witness signatures from 40% of the population of the ward within 60 days. And that number is often actually higher than the total number of people who actually voted in the election. These are real petition signatures, by the way, not some online thing. You need to have the person sign the petition in person on a physical copy with a witness, and they have to provide their address and phone number so the signatures can be confirmed if need be, and they have to be on the electoral lists. How many people are willing and trusting enough to provide that to a petitioner? I tell you what, going door to door, a person would have to work their ass off just to get 100 signatures a day. And they would somehow need to get tens of thousands of those signatures in 60 days. Yeah, right. Likewise, to initiate a referendum, the bar is ridiculous. A person has a 90-day window to collect signatures from 10% of the province's eligible voters, and that goes to 20% if it's a constitutional issue. Like, this is just beyond the pale. It's insulting, and it's a slap in the face to the people who elected him based on that. Now, you would have been better off just not tabling it at all. But to put out something, it's like giving somebody a gun and saying, but I'm not going to allow you to have the bullets. It can still be fixed. Danielle Smith has always shown a lot of support for things like direct democracy and items like that. Perhaps with some encouragement, she could be pushed into amending this bill. These bills don't have to be tossed out, but they need to be fixed. That bar needs to be set, and it needs to be realistic. Of course, no politicians ever like to put accountability legislation in that might actually impact them down the road. And I'm afraid Premier Smith might not even be an exception. So it's up to you guys. Get on her case. Push for that one. Push your MLAs. Get that moving, because it's good legislation, but it needs to be, the teeth need to be put back into it that Premier Kenney took out of it when he first modeled it. That's what's kind of got me ranting and raving. Either way, like I said, this is something I think the left and right can get on board with. I mean, the people most furious, the ones that they really want to get, is Councillor Sean Chu. They're furious with him and they want to recall him. I don't know if he needs to be recalled or not. That's a separate discussion. But they're discovering, again, it just can't be done. Those numbers are not realistic. And it was insulting. And there's other countries and states that have done this before. It's not like Kenney could pretend we didn't have precedent to see what a workable recall or referendum legislation looks like. It's already out there. They could have set the bars based on that. They purposely made it impossible. And that was a political bait and switch. And to be honest, like so many things, unfortunately, with Premier Kenney, it was unforgivable. One of the many that led to his downfall. All right, well, let's get on to some other news here and check in with our news editor, Dave Naylor. I abandoned him last week and didn't let him check in, and it was tragic. But this time, we're certainly seeing what's happening in the newsroom today. How's it going, Dave?
Good. I'm still recovered from this.
Okay, sorry, I didn't quite catch what you said there, Dave. A little bit of feedback.
Oh, sorry about that. Just how are you doing? Thanks for having me on the show after the snub last week.
Well, yeah, thanks. I'm happy you've forgiven me this time.
There you go. Hey, I hear you're getting back into bee business.
I am. I've got more bees that are going to be coming this spring. I'm getting them. And I'm going to set up, I'm going to defeat that bear this year.
All right, we'll have weekly updates, Cory versus the bear. It'll be great.
You can get those updates when I'm all stung from head to toe and I screw up out there with the hive and everything too.
Exactly. Lots of stuff going on the website this morning, Cory. Our Vancouver correspondent, Reed Smalls, got a story on a BC man who tried to get some of his stolen property out from a local hobo encampment and got shot for his troubles. So there is a plea for trying to deal with what they call a vigilantism type problem. We've got our real estate expert, Mike Thomas, talking about what's happening in the Canadian home buying market, and it looks like things are getting back to normal after the pandemic. And speaking of experts, we've got our energy expert, Sean Pulser, talking about a multi-billion-dollar floating liquid natural gas facility that the BC government has given approval for. And we got a funny video up from Ontario politician Randy Hillier talking about 15-minute cities. And he describes a 15-minute city just like walking around his chicken coop. And it's good for a chuckle if you haven't looked at it yet. We've also got a sad story up really on 17 wild horses being shot and killed out on a First Nation reserve near Kamloops in the BC interior. And we've got a story on a drag show down in Florida that had a drag show at the Hyatt Regency, and that hotel has had its liquor license pulled because there were children at the drag show, and it was a very sexual show apparently. And that's stuff, a lot more stuff. And keep eyes on the Linda Slee column coming up this afternoon. She's writing on the new city council bylaw that protects drag shows and the like. No protests within 100 meters of city facilities. And also coming in that column is a link to the Soviet national anthem back in the old days. So you'll get a sense of what Linda's writing about or what angle she's taking right there, Cory.
Right on. Well, yeah, Linda doesn't pull any punches, that's for sure. I'm looking forward to that one. I heard you playing that in the newsroom earlier. I was wondering what the hell you were playing that anthem for. Okay, now I got an idea.
Yeah. No, you know what? I will give it to the Soviets. It was a pretty stirring national anthem. So, welcome to come, Cory. And the whole newsroom is a buzz with excitement because Tamara Lich is visiting. So everybody's shaking her hand and welcoming her to the Western Standard in your show.
Yes, no, I'm quite looking forward to that conversation right away. All right. Well, thanks for the update, Dave, and we'll talk to you after the show.
Thanks, Cory.
All right, that is our news editor, Dave Naylor. Yes, he's always managing all those people from all across the country who are putting those stories in and covering things for you guys. It's just that time I got to nag you and remind you. The reason we can stay independent, the reason we can pay the bills is because you guys have been subscribing. This is why we can proudly stand up and say we refuse to take any government dollars, ever, not a penny. But we can only do it because you guys are subscribing. So if you haven't subscribed yet, come on, guys. $9.99 a month, $100 for a year. It's well worth it. I mean, come on, you used to pay for newspaper subscriptions without thinking about it. This is the same sort of thing. So get on there, take out a subscription. And if you subscribed already, we really do appreciate it. All right, let's look through some of those comments. I see North Run Grader talking about, I guess with my beehive saying 5 lines of electric fence around the hives. Yeah, I had a bunch. My ongoing battle with that damn bear went on for a while. I was kind of documenting it last fall. It kept coming back in the night. I even shot it with rubber buckshot to try and discourage it. And I had electric wiring, but it didn't care. So I'm going to build a fortress around that darn hive this year because I know he's going to be back. And I'm going to beat that thing. But I still won't shoot it because I like bears even more than bees, even if they're being jerks. So let's see. Looking at some of this news, something we didn't touch on with Dave, but it's constantly going on and it's still happening, is of course the ongoing scandal with the China interference. I mean, are we going to get an inquiry? When are we going to get an inquiry? How much longer can Prime Minister Trudeau manage to hold this off? The filibustering going on, because of course, the Liberal MPs, and for those who aren't political wieners, most of you know, but filibustering is basically when a party or group is just purposely abusing a committee's rules or a gathering's rules to try and work out the clock or tire people out. So Liberal MPs the other night put in 22 hours on a filibuster. They were talking about everything from their summer vacations to you name it, just to fill the time up to avoid having Trudeau's Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, show up and even appear before the committee. It reeks. It reeks. I mean, what are they hiding? It stinks to high heaven. The frustrating thing, though, I mean, we're seeing some political unity in a way. The leader of the Bloc Québécois, he's come out and said, yes, that's it. We need an inquiry. We're going to force a vote on it. We've got a couple of votes coming up, and the opposition parties can formally vote for that inquiry as a parliamentary order. And the Conservatives are committed to that, too. Jagmeet Singh, though, he said he wants an inquiry, but he waffles every time they talk about actually forcing the issue. And that's what really frustrates on this whole front. Like, if he won't play ball, it won't happen. And I don't think, I mean, this rot is too deep. Canadians are too frustrated. They're too worked up over this whole thing. It's going to get settled. It's going to get resolved. It's going to get exposed. It's just a matter of how long they'll be able to drag it out before it happens. So, I mean, come on, Singh, just show some principles. You can still be a lefty and your socialist self and everything, but go stand up and say, look, I've got to stand up. We've got to demand a full inquiry and find out just what the heck has happened here. Right now, we've got a lot of Canadians of Asian descent who are unfairly getting smeared as perhaps being connected with the Chinese Communist Party. And of course, we've got a lot of people who are beholden to the Chinese Communist Party, but we don't know who they are, or how beholden they are, or what it's done, what it's impacted. This is serious, serious business. And so far, Trudeau's been skating on it, or trying to. I mean, it's getting to them. It's getting to them. But the linchpin right now is Jagmeet Singh. I mean, come on. You got into politics once in a while to take a principled stand, didn't you? I mean, don't you want to go to bed at night and just one time say, I did the right thing. I forced something. I couldn't take this anymore. But right now, he's still stuck in that self-serving agreement with Trudeau, and it's just brutal to see. Let's see. I'll hit on something else. I'm on kind of an optimistic note. This is interesting, but it's going to require some testicular fortitude on the part of the government, so that could be a big ask. But Dave mentioned that. Yeah, there's an LNG export facility off the coast of BC. It's out by Kitimat. This would be a floating LNG terminal, liquid natural gas, where they could export. The thing is, with those floating ones, they can build those a lot faster and get them operational more quickly. That's what Germany did when our moron of a prime minister went and said there was no business case for natural gas to send to Germany. Well, Germany set up a floating terminal, and they got natural gas from Qatar and the United States while we're still sitting on our thumbs over here. But at least on BC, they've got this going on because the construction in Kitimat on the formal terminal is taking forever, as usual, due to Canadian regulations and problems. But the other issue is, of course, the ongoing eco-terrorism against the Coastal GasLink line, because that's the line that's going to bring the gas to these terminals. And if Trudeau doesn't get off his butt and somehow get in there and lay down real law. We're going to talk about where he lays down the law in stupid places really quickly here. But in the areas where we do need it, they don't do anything. We had a work camp attacked by a bunch of guys with axes and shooting flares at security guards. Still no arrests, no progress, no reports on this. This pipeline's delayed and delayed. The costs are going through the roof. Illegal demonstrations, illegal camping in the middle of it, all sorts of stuff going on. They won't crack down on that. So I don't care how many floating LNG terminals you want to stick off the coast. If you can't get the gas to it, you might as well use it to get rid of sewage or something, because it's pointless. It's completely pointless. So, I mean, I'm a little heartened. I want to see more export capability. It's good for us. That one is a partnership with a First Nation up there in that deal, and it's going to be really good for the people living up that way. But they got to get it into production, and they're not going to do it without that pipeline. So again, among the many other things going on up there, it'd be nice to see some pragmatic courage from Ottawa. I know. I haven't gone back to drinking again. I just try to hold optimism on some of these things now and then, because I need to be able to sleep at night now and then. All right. Well, you know what? My guest is here and set up. So I'm going to run a quick ad, because I know you guys aren't all tuning in for me. You're sick of looking at me already. And we'll talk to Tamara right away. So the other way we pay our bills, though, is with our sponsors. So have a quick look at this ad, and then we're going to have a chat with Tamara Lich.
Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Without the CSSA, our gun rights would have been taken long ago. These guys are on the front lines helping to draft smart and intelligent firearms regulations and legislation in Canada, and more importantly, educating the public about how we keep guns out of the hands of the wrong people. To become a member, it's absolutely worth every penny.
All right. Well, Tamara, welcome to the Western Standard Studio. We've really been looking forward to this. It's overdue to have you in here.
Thank
it really
you.
is. So
thank you. It's a pleasure to be here finally and meet everyone in person.
I really appreciate it. I'm hoping we can have a good conversation, cover a lot of things. I want to clear some misconceptions or things that have been thrown your way. I'm going to start with one, though, because I noticed our news editor went and did it right off the bat. I asked you point blank in the news, because we've talked in the past and years gone by, through Maverick Party. I never refer to a person by their last name, so it never occurred to me. And pronouncing your last name shouldn't be that complicated, but it gets some people. It's Tamara Lich.
Yes.
So see, we get that out of the way. So, further interviews and things like that.
Nobody gets it right.
There. See, we've already fixed up one big misconception in the first minute in the show.
Yes.
So, I mean, I guess I'm just going to start with, I want to talk a bit on the personal. How are you doing?
I'm doing really, really well. It's been quite busy. Obviously, there's still a lot going on with the lawsuits and the criminal charges and everything. So that's keeping me busy. And but I consider myself an eternal optimist. So I mean, I don't let it get me down.
Well, good. I mean, that's what I was happy to see when you came in the newsroom. You chat with everybody. You're really upbeat. I mean, you've had just a bizarre year that 14 months ago you never would have imagined was going to happen, and you're still in the midst of it. So, like, what kind of legal timeline are you looking at? I know they keep changing things, but I mean, is there kind of a light at the end of the tunnel where you might get closure on this?
Well, I'm really hoping so. So far, our criminal trial, because Chris and I are still at this point co-accused, and so we'll be tried together, is set for September 2nd, and I believe they've got 2 weeks set aside for that. So as far as the criminal stuff goes, I'm really hopeful that after that stuff will all be dealt with. And then, of course, we have the ongoing civil suit. So I never thought I'd have so many lawyers in my life.
Yeah, and I was just reading about that civil suit this morning, actually. They're looking at hundreds of millions of dollars, which is ridiculous. I mean, it's, I guess, a point of principle thing then, blood from a stone. As far as I know, you don't have hundreds of millions of dollars laying around.
No.
There's another one to clear up. I mean, I get so infuriated when I watch the social media things, and you haven't had much chance to speak. One was a rumor, and again, that, you've run off with a whole bunch of money out of this. I didn't see the Ferrari drop you off today or anything like that. So, I mean, people have been very helpful and things, but you haven't been standing by a bunch of
no. And I mean, and all the money that was donated, it was locked up immediately. Anyways, we have absolutely no access to it. So, I've heard I've bought property in Hull, Quebec. I heard I've taken off to Mexico. I hear all these rumors, and it's quite funny. And the ironic thing is that if people really want to know what's going on with the money, it's a Google search.
Yeah, it's not that hard.
We've had a forensic audit done, and then of course we had FinTrack investigate where the donations came from. So I chalk that up to laziness.
Yeah, well, and people just want to perceive
Yes.
certain things. Like I said, that's what part of what frustrated me. And as I said, I wanted to get you on talking and for people to realize they don't have to agree with what the convoy was about perhaps or things like that, but you've just really been dragged through the mud as a terrorist, the terms I've heard, Nazi extremist, things like that. And at least to my knowledge, if you are all of those things, you keep them very, very well bottled up because I haven't seen any indications of it so far.
Yes, thank you. I don't think I'm a Nazi, no.
No, and just the absurdity of this whole mess. And I mean, also the fact that the government's been feeding it too. I mean, the vitriol in trying to keep you locked up. Speaking of points of principle, I mean, if you look at the basics of bail, it's if a person's presenting a risk to society, if you let them out, then perhaps you should keep them in. Now, our government hasn't been doing it very well in general. We had a police officer killed by a gentleman out on bail, and we're seeing all sorts of very dangerous people put out on bail all the time. But you really had to battle. I mean, you've never committed a crime. You've never harmed
no
anybody.
criminal record, nothing. No.
No, and I imagine you haven't harmed anybody since you've been on bail.
No. Yeah, I've been
not that you
behaving well
here, anyways.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I don't really understand it. I think in a way I'm lucky that I'm not allowed on for social media right now because people can be cruel, and I like to pride myself. I think I have pretty thick skin, though. I don't really let it get me down. My dad always said 10% of the people aren't going to like you anyways, just because. So I'm not going to please everybody.
No, when that's again, I mean, yeah, you still sometimes you look at stuff and you read, but you can't help yourself. But I mean, over time you get. Some people get used to it. Yeah, you're not.
But you need to understand, though. I mean, that whole narrative was crafted by the PMO and the Public Safety Office about us before I even got into Big Red in Medicine Hat and left on the convoy. I mean, this narrative was totally crafted.
Well, part of my theory on it, for what it's worth, is that I mean, there was no single leader of this whole movement. It was a really unprecedented organic thing that happened, and. The thing that you scared them with was that you aren't a demon. You don't have swastika tattooed on your face. You don't have a big, long, crazy criminal history. Right. No, and that's not what they want to be projected to the public. They want it to be seen that everybody involved in this was insane and they're seditionists and they were trying to, rip the country to shreds. And that's my job. But I think that's part of why they really cracked down on you. I mean, if you were kind of off the handle, they would just will give a rope.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and we were talking earlier about the protest that happened in early 2020. So I mean, I am Métis. So if I had been protesting in that protest and burning, railway ties, would the outcome have been different? Maybe I would be hailed as a hero by the Liberal government now.
Well, yeah, and some of the frustration. I mean, you brought that up when we were talking before too. So I mean, it was like COVID saved the government's butt from a sticky situation and actually it's related to what I was ranting about. The CGL pipeline sparked it off. Some protesters got removed from it, and then it sparked protests across the country. They blocked railways. It was First Nations, mostly. Actually, I think enviro activists hiding behind First Nations people, but
yes, yeah,
because of the COVID hit, it kind of gave them an out and everything kind of came to an end. But otherwise, as you said, the government was in, they were negotiating all over the place. These guys are blocking rail lines. They're lighting fires. They're getting very dangerous and they're negotiating. But with you guys in Ottawa, there was never a single even attempt to converse with you. And that's just so wrong.
Yeah. Especially during that protest in particular, the Prime Minister kept talking about the importance of dialogue and the importance of keeping dialogue open and hearing the other side of the story. And he never once wanted to hear our side of the story.
No. And as I said, you didn't even try. I said, I know politics. You can go through the motions. You can even send a representative from the Privy Office down to say, okay, we're going to talk to them. And then they can sit and go through the motion. Then they come back and say, these guys they're intractable. We couldn't get anywhere, but at least you showed you tried.
Yes.
But they didn't even offer that much.
No. Which still surprises me to this day, because I mean, one of the things I said about the donations, I mean, we raised over $10 million twice, but it was never about the money. It was the statement behind the money, and I think that really the support, the monetary support through donations, the donations that we received food and clothing from Canadians, and just the people that showed up on the overpasses and the side of the highways, I think that really scared them.
Well, it should. I mean, that raised more money in a few weeks than the
Yes.
entire governing party does in 6 months. So, I mean, it shows an outside a lot more support. It's hard to pretend that this is only 5,000, whatever amount of people in Ottawa, when clearly you've got donor numbers in the tens of thousands of people supporting it from outside of there, possibly hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
Likewise, you didn't get any calls from Putin in large donations or
No.
anything like that. That was the one.
Yeah,
Even
that
the CBC
was.
had to admit that one was BS.
Yeah, that was hilarious, actually.
I mean, maybe we talked a bit about it. Just when you started, if you kind of run, because I mean, again, you weren't a professional activist. This isn't your thing. You were politically active before. That's how I first ran across you. You were on the board with the Maverick Party.
Yes, yeah.
So you're active, and you started the fundraiser for people going out when the convoy was going. But I mean, at that point, you didn't imagine anything what was going to turn out like
No, and I laugh about this because we did not see that coming. Really, literally, like when I first talked to Chris Barber, I just offered. I said, "This is my skill set. I'm good at logistics and administration and organization. How can I help you?" And I just had. When I started the fundraiser, I just assumed, we'd make maybe $20,000 in donations, which would pay, say, for Chris and Bridget and some truckers to drive across the country and stand up with their signs on Parliament Hill and then hop in their trucks and come back home. And, we blew past that in 24 hours. I think we were over $100,000 in donations within the first 24 hours.
Well, I think part of it was just you were the first one out with it.
Yeah.
And you tapped into something that was much bigger. People didn't even know was there until they had the ability to contribute.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it was a perfect storm of events, I think.
Well, and a lot more people, again, I think that's part of why I got it, because people could see there's a lot more behind this than the others. Like most people just, they don't have the ability. You got the kids at home, you got the job or whatever. I can't pick up and drive across the country and take part in that protest, but boy, I really like what they're doing. So here's $10, here's $50, here's $100 or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and again, people, I think so many people were able to come, and every Canadian just wanted to feel like they were a part of it. So if they couldn't come or they couldn't go to the road, I mean, they wanted to be a part of it. So even donating $10 made them feel, that they were part of the gang, kind of.
Well, that's it. So I know it's hard. It's working with hindsight. Like, there things I know this could be dangerous. Things you wish you'd done differently yourself?
Not really. I mean, I look back at that. Obviously, I spent a lot of time thinking about everything and what I could do differently. And, I'm a believer that everything happens for a reason. And so I don't know what we could change. I mean, other than, say, the exit strategy to get out a little bit sooner. But, that was one of the things with the deal with the city that we were so excited about, at least from my perspective. Like, I thought that was going to give us an out or going to allow us to start so we start with the city, and then maybe we can talk to the province next, and then maybe the feds will come in. Like I really saw that as a first step in an exit strategy.
Yeah, because there does have to be an end game. We were kind of talking a bit about that outside. You can't camp indefinitely for months. I think some people might have been prepared to, but realistically, things had to come. But there was just never a chance for that plan to form or go into action, because everything. Well, finally, the Emergencies Act said, okay, everything's going to blow up now.
Well, and I don't think any of us really thought that the federal government would not come out and talk to us. Like, I thought for sure within a week, somebody would be sent to just hear us out or ask what we wanted or ask what the problem is. And, that just never happened.
Any conflict, I mean, negotiation's the first step. If it's, and I'm not comparing this to a bank robbery, but let's say there was a bank heist and there's a bunch of hostages. You don't come in guns blazing. You start by negotiating.
That's right. Yeah.
And they didn't even start there. They went straight to the enforcement aspect of it. So, I mean, you had a lot of time to think, a lot of time while you were in remand. Just to review, how long were you in custody?
48 days in jail, all told, between the summer and last winter. Yeah.
I mean, aside from one weird night in the 90s, in a drunk tank, I haven't had experience in the jails. But from what I've heard, remand is kind of one of the worst spots to be in too, because it's just it's a temporary, theoretically custodial spot, whereas a long-term facility, at least you'll have some services.
That's right. Yeah, so that's right. Yeah,
that's why they offer prisoners, I think, 2-to-1 on sentences for remand time spent. It must have been at least brought you down while you were in there. I mean, tough on you. Right?
Nope. When I was arrested, I just felt like you know, through the course of this whole thing, I feel like so many things got exposed. I mean, the mainstream media definitely exposed themselves. You know, Justin Trudeau comes right out of the gate calling us a bunch of names, and organizations like GoFundMe expose themselves, you know. And so when I was arrested, I was literally just at peace with it. I just thought, okay, you know, my higher power, what I choose to believe in, obviously had more work for me to do. And I didn't feel afraid. You just put one foot in front of the other, and you know.
Well, and one thing to thank you guys for what you brought up, in a sense, like was that yeah, they really did expose just how broken the establishment media is, and just from a selfish perspective in the Western Standard, our subscriptions shot through the roof over that period. Same with Rebel and Post Millennial and True North, because people were so repulsed by the terrible slanted coverage we saw from CBC, CTV Global. They were all awful.
Yeah, it was terrible.
And people saw through it, though.
Yeah,
they
did. That's good. It's about time. And I'm really happy that organizations like this one and, you know, all the independents are finally getting some traction.
Yeah, well, and people are retreating to us, I guess, in a sense. So,
yeah.
So what are your plans going forward? I mean, you can only do so much while you're still kind of in a legal limbo, but still, I mean, you got plans. You're not going to be in jail for 30 years, despite what some people are claiming to wish upon you and such.
Yeah. Hopefully not 30 years, no. I'll be long dead by then, I'm thinking. So, yeah, again, everything is still a bit in limbo with these charges and everything hanging over me. But I do have a book coming out that should be out hopefully within the next few weeks. So I've been working on that. And then we'll see. There's just so much going on right now. It's hard to know where I'm going to land, you know. But I've had a lot of people ask me about entering politics, which is something that I'm not really keen on doing now, if ever. But so I guess we'll see how it all falls apart or falls out. I mean, yeah.
So which was the biggest? I'm just trying to clear misconceptions. What's the biggest one you'd like to cover today while you're on here? Like, there's the list is so long on things that have gone around out there, or false news, or things like that. Like, what would you like to clarify while you've got a moment?
That's a good question, because there is so much. I think from my perspective, especially sitting through that whole inquiry, that was 6 weeks of, you know, and I was there just about every day listening to the testimony and all the witnesses and everything. And my takeaway from the POEC was, regardless of what you think, you know, we're just a bunch of grassroots blue collar workers, and we were professional. We were organized. You know, I think that we were able to identify problems before they occurred, and I feel like we did everything right, just about for the most part. You know, we were worried about safety and keeping people safe. We were advocating for peace and love and respect and respecting the police officers. You know, which is just stuff that you don't hear very much anymore. You know. So when I look back on it, I think we just did so many things right, and I'm just so proud of the truckers and the supporters, and you know, we didn't even break a window there.
No, that was striking. I mean, for a protest with that many people, and no matter where on the spectrum you are, sometimes you're going to attract some people who get a little too excited, or some people who are just outright crazy, and they're going to do some damage or hurt people. And as much as the warnings constantly came out, it wasn't happening. No. This was annoying for people. I understand. If I lived down there and the horns were going for days, I'd really be getting grumpy as well, or trying to get to work in the traffic. I mean, but that's what happens with protests. You live in Ottawa.
Well, it is the capital city.
Yeah. But,
you know.
But there was no riots. There was no, again, despite the efforts of some media sources to try and claim, you know, there were no buildings being
the arson,
down, no shotguns seized.
Yeah.
I guess also to clarify too, though, I mean, part of the problem with a non-centrally sort of led thing, though, I mean, there were a few of you who were certainly the representatives and organizers, but at the same time, it was diverse. The border issues, I mean, there was Windsor and Coots in Alberta, but those had no, I mean, you have to say they're related. I mean, it all blew up at the same time. It's the same grievances and concerns, but these were separate protests.
They were all separate, their own grassroots movement. And when we were, I think Emerson was the first one that we heard of, and we were on our way to Ottawa still. So, and we were so busy when we got on the ground. Like, we knew that they were happening at these different locations, border crossings, but I couldn't follow it. I was too busy, like I knew that they were happening. I tried to just get kind of the Coles Notes virgins throughout the day to find out, how things were progressing down there. But yeah, like we had enough of our own things to worry about in Ottawa, let alone those, right? But
yeah, well, it's just that there's separate issues still being
yes.
dealt with in the law. There's the Coots bunch,
Yeah.
there were, and you can't speak to it because you had absolutely nothing to do
That's
with it.
right, yeah.
But that gets thrown onto the Ottawa protests at the same time. People saying this was an act of sedition and there were firearms and this, there was none of that.
Well, nobody's been charged with sedition.
No, and that's another one.
Which is funny.
Yeah, if it was treason, if it's sedition, we have it on the books.
Yeah.
And they certainly weren't afraid to charge you with everything they possibly could. So
Yeah.
you think they probably would have thrown that into the bunch.
If they thought that that's what we were going to do, which was never, that was never the case,
Can you address a little bit of that? Most of that came from that ridiculous memorandum of understanding that was kind of posted on Facebook. But that was just kind of something hatched up by a little group on their
a different organization, right? A totally different organization. I've never even read it. I don't even know what it says. That was never our intention. We just wanted to be heard and wanted the federal government to take a look at how these mandates and stuff were affecting people. And again, like every single day driving across this country, people were crying on my shoulder because they were about to kill themselves, or they just lost their business, or they just lost their job, or that was the core group, I guess. That was our main concern was, there has to be a better way.
Well, and again, that's something I appreciate, at least, and I'm sure a lot of Canadians do, that you show that there's a line. That there's a point where Canadians have had enough. And even if it's a minority of Canadians, if you're talking about 10% or 20%, that's a significant minority of Canadians who are saying, we've had enough. We're not putting up with this any longer.
That's right.
We just kind of hope that lesson got driven home to, I don't know, that's not a government that's easy at taking lessons. But,
No.
There is a line eventually.
Yeah, that's right.
And had there been, say, after the protests, he's just guessing, you wouldn't have taken part of it, but if they increased more restrictions and brought more stuff down, I got a feeling a very tired population would have pushed back again. They said, that's enough. This is where it's
the Ontario government during the POEC, we're talking about bringing masks back in and recommending them, and they all but stopped short of mandating them. We were obviously kind of watching that very closely because I was curious too how far they were willing to go again. But they just stopped short of mandating it.
Yeah, and there's a lot that just seem eager to bring in as many mandates and controls as they can, and there were people fighting against the removal of the ridiculous vaccine passports in Calgary.
The govern me harder daddies.
Yes.
I call them the govern me harder daddies.
And I still get on her case with Deborah Yedlin, heads of the Chamber of Commerce. These are business leaders, supposedly, said it'll be bad for restaurants if you get rid of that vaccine passport. This is telling me a business leader. You've never run a business. I ran a restaurant for 5 years.
Yeah, that's right.
And if you're going to have one more step that annoys and limits your customers and everything, it's not good for business.
No.
You could try to make the case it's for health, but don't piss on my leg and tell me it's raining and say that it's doing me good as a business, because it's not.
That's right.
But that needed to be exposed, because she shows that there was that element of people, they want more. They want to keep the restrictions. I don't know what it is, that security blanket, that govern me harder.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see that. I don't talk to anybody that actually wants more restrictions and more rules and more laws. I don't run in those circles.
No,
anyway.
But yeah, that's outside of our bubbles. And that's things we got to be careful with.
Yeah.
It's good that you got to break from social media. We're bad for that.
Yes.
We talk about algorithms too. We hear a lot of our own echo chambers, but hey, there's other voices out there.
Yeah.
Maybe just to kind of fish up, maybe, you're not planning on organizing protests. Again, we're standing
no.
But worrisome on where we've had this precedent set on crushing protests. We're seeing that big debate in Calgary right now with, again, where the person agrees or disagrees with the readings of libraries and things like that, where the city has banned protesting within 100 yards of the facility. We got to be really careful when you start limiting the ability to protest, even if you don't like.
That's right.
We were kind of talking about that before. Yeah. When you crack down on them, the next government might be after you with that same legislation.
That's exactly right. And that's kind of what I say when people talk about how, like, lock her up and throw away the key and I hope she goes to jail for life. Well, that's fine if that's what you want. I mean, but you have to realize that this government isn't going to be in power forever. And maybe the next one is going to find fault with something that you've done. You know,
might
I
be
mean,
the head of Greenpeace next time. It might
that's
be
right.
an Indigenous leader, because if it's a government that doesn't particularly feel as fond of their protests.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to protect these.
I find it ironic and a little bit funny that you can ban protests, because that's actually what a protest is. I mean, wasn't it Trudeau that said at the POEC in his testimony that he doesn't think it's right that people protest in order to change policy? Like, that's the whole point of having a protest.
Well, yeah. I know, and it is a fuzzy area when you get between civil disobedience and the right of protest.
It's a fine line.
And, you know, the lines get crossed. Sometimes the state has to intervene. And I know my libertarian followers cringe when I say that. Sometimes there's a line crossed. But
I think it all has to be respectful. And that's kind of my biggest thing is to always be respectful. You know, like, we didn't want to go to Ottawa and call people a bunch of names and be rude and terrible, then when the mask mandates were in, I put a mask on to walk into a store. I'd put it on at the last minute and take it off as soon as I could. But I mean, I could still respect their rules. And I didn't go in there and call them names or tell them how stupid I thought it was. Like, I think you're going to lose people when you start being disrespectful and rude.
Yeah, there was a circumstance of that in Calgary. There was a bunch of protesters went into a mall and really made a racket and yelling. I mean, these are innocent mall security people and retail clerks. Look, they probably don't like the masks any more than you do. Yeah, you're not doing your cause any favors when you get on their case. Maybe kind of asking about that as trying to lead or be one of the leaders of this group in a sense. How many fires did you have to put out there? Because as we said, there are some kind of offbeat people. I mean, one of the best things I saw was that one clown walking around with that Confederate flag.
Yes,
and he was masked. And I still wonder how much he really endured. He happened to be masked as well, but they didn't put up with that. And that was the best thing I could see. The other protesters chased him off, not the police, not anything else. They said, "Hey, you aren't with us. Get stuff. Go away."
And they didn't do it rudely or call him any names. They just said, "You're not welcome here, so please leave."
Did you guys make some of those efforts occasionally? Or do you
have there was a lot. I mean, we were putting out lots of fires, honestly, but for the most part, people were really good. Of course, any type of protest or large gathering like that is going to attract a few bad eggs. And again, we just kept our message about peace and love and unity. And, if something came up, we fixed it, There was the Shepherds of Good Hope. That was like, I think the first incident that I heard of. And I still don't even know the story there, what happened. But, we heard that some truckers went in and stole a bunch of food and they were rude, which I can't see, period, happening. But, what did we do? Well, we took a bunch of donations and we had food banks and shelters turning food away because we were giving so much away. But that was because of the generosity of Canadians, like, it was incredible.
Well, I mean, it was quite something. We're starting to run the timeout. But I mean, it's good just to be able to look back and review, because I think with most of the tempers, when they calm down, I think a lot of people will look back on this and realize that there was a lot of mistakes made on a lot of parts. And but I mean, I think it'll look kindly mostly on a lot of the organizers' parts as compared to what you've taken. But I'm biased on that. I don't know. Some people are always going to despise every.
Oh, of course,
right to the end. I mean, something I'm hopeful for. A lot of judges, liberal appointed or not, they take their role very seriously and they follow the law seriously. And I'm hoping it's a rational one when the time comes when they realize, we're not serving the world any better by putting you back behind bars or any kind of crazy, odious sins.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. I'm not sure what the outcome will be, but after 48 days in jail over mischief, I just can't see them putting me back in. But who knows? Nothing would surprise me anymore.
I allowed myself to be surprised when that happened, when they sent homicide detectives all the way from Ottawa. 2 of them flew them to Medicine Hat to pick you up and fly you back. Yeah. Again, surprised and outraged me. Not just because of cracking down on you, but okay, look at the resources. These are homicide detectives. There's some dead people you should be finding the killers of. I mean, you got better things to do.
And right at that time, there had been like a mass stabbing in Ottawa. I think a city councillor and her daughter were stabbed. So yeah, like I thought that was a bit of an overreach too. I mean, to homicide. I'm literally 5 feet tall.
Yeah, I noticed you're a small person when you came in. I mean, you only need so much restraint, a little masking tape on the airplane seat, and you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But
and the irony is, literally all they would have had to do was call me and say, Miss Leach, we're concerned you've breached your conditions. Please go to the police station. They had me surveilled and followed, and then taken down on the street on my way home from work. Actually, I was on my way home from my sureties. I just stopped at my sureties so that she could go through all my devices and make sure I wasn't on social media or communicating with people I'm not supposed to be communicating with. So, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, it was a bit of a surprise.
Absurd.
I'm really not that big of a deal.
Well, they feel you are, and as I said, you are to them. You're a symbol of. Darn, there were rational people behind it, and I don't think they want the public to see that.
No.
And you're still letting the public know that, so I really do appreciate that, and I really appreciate you coming in today. I'm looking forward to the book. I hope we can talk again when that's out.
Absolutely, we will.
Great. Anything else you'd like to say to the audience before we let you go?
Thanks for all the support that everyone's given, and I look forward to seeing what the next few months brings.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right. So, okay, guys. Yes, that was Tamara Lich. Remember, Leach. It's not that hard, Dave. But, yes, in studio, and I hope we covered a lot of stuff. Like I said, we don't want to retry everything. I just want to get to talk about the people behind it. They're real people. And that, some of the awful treatment we see of people on social media when they become in the public sphere and anything controversial, even in the slightest way. And this was, of course, very controversial. And it's just not principled, it's not right, and it's not fair to drag people through the mud like that, to label them like that. You can say they're wrong, you can disagree, you can agree and feel that they should be charged and punished, but we've allowed it to get to such a crazed extent. I mean, we're talking about, as Tamara was saying, there's people saying, I want you to die of old age in prison, and you're a Nazi, and you're a racist, and you're a, there's no limit to it. And our mainstream media fed it. Tamara touched on that a little bit. Like, this didn't come out of nowhere. This came from what should be trusted sources of information. It's one thing for some anonymous ding-dong on Twitter with a name and a bunch of numbers behind it to say something, but we had the CBC saying there was Russian money going to these guys. And we were talking about the irony of all of the effort to try and create the rumor that these guys were foreign funded when we've got a government that seems to be beholden to the Communist Party of China. So maybe, he doth protest too much. So we've seen no evidence of, Putin again directing things during the Convoy protests, but we certainly have some pretty compelling looking evidence that there's a number of elected officials that owe their allegiance to somebody other than Canada. Speaking of, sedition or treason, maybe we should be getting to the bottom of that. But this is still ongoing. This is not over. And that's part of why I was happy to have Tamara on as well, so people don't forget about it. She's still in legal limbo. She's still battling this. And I'm shocked with how upbeat she is. I mean, I don't know. I'm more of inclined to being a stressed out basket case in general, I guess. But if I was sitting there waiting on all this is court hearings and cases and everything, I'd be a mess. I'm sure of it. So she's holding up really well, and we'll see what happens. And that was the first I heard there's a book on the way. So I'm looking forward to that. I mean, I'm sure we'll get a lot of expanded on what happened out there. Again, it was a really unique anyways, event and everything. And all things considered, as much as it maddened a lot of Ottawa residents and things, I mean, it, as Tamara was saying, very, very peaceful. So, well, we'll see what comes of it. All right, let's cover a few more news items while I'm here. Let's get back to that. Some of the, speaking of idiocy in parliaments, and there's always lots to dig from, isn't there? This one was a neat one. MP says she's safe because she's Dutch. Yes, this is a Liberal MP, Anita van den Beld. And but certainly very Dutch heritage there. And she's basically saying, this is the roundabout Liberal way of saying anybody talking about the communist China infiltration of political officials is a racist. This is what she's saying. So she's saying, as soon as you say someone's disloyal to this country or working with foreign agents, their lives are ruined. And she's saying basically, if we keep talking about this, we're ruining the lives of every politician of Asian descent in Canada. That's kind of what she's saying. And she's saying, obviously, I'm not working for China. That's her words. I'm Dutch. What if I was Chinese, she added. What if my parents were Chinese? And I get so mad because I say it's the other way around. I know that the vast majority of people of Chinese heritage or Asian heritage have absolutely nothing to do with the Communist Party. In fact, they probably despise the Communist Party, or they're terrified of the Chinese Communist Party. And that's why we need this inquiry. You want to bury it, you Dutch person. Don't worry, I'm married to one. I'm okay with Dutch folks in general. But they need this inquiry to clear their names, because there are some intolerant people looking out of the corner of their eye. That person's of Asian heritage. I wonder if maybe they're one of the ones with the Chinese police station, or I wonder if they got donations to their campaign that were illegitimate or wrong, or from the Chinese government. Nobody knows. We can't find out until we get a full inquiry. And instead, we got that dingbat of a prime minister. Oh, my special rapporteur already made up a term of ridiculousness. He's going to appoint somebody to investigate him, like I said. And why is it taking this long even anyways, Prime Minister Ding Dong? It's not that hard. Pick somebody. You've got lots of family you like employing. Get your mom, Margaret, to head the thing up, or, your brother. Because, it's about as much as this thing's going to be worth. Let's see. What's this? See, here's some of the talk, though. Roland Lemereau, we're taken down by lunatics. Lich is one of them, creeps and gangsters. Really, Roland? What the hell are you talking about? Where are you getting this? What's the point of this? What's the basis of this? Why? What did you see? I don't know where some people go with things sometimes. Speaking of social media, here's looking at things, Speaking of our just transition, right? That's one of the things they love talking about. Rachel Notley, Justin Trudeau, we're going to transition everybody out of oil and gas, even though the world needs it more and more every day. We're going to go to tech jobs. We're going to go to the work for all those tech companies. Well, Microsoft, Meta, and Twitter laid off 155,000 workers last year. Yeah. So, and it sounds like it's just announced that Meta's going to lay off another 10,000. So wherever the transition is going to be going, I don't think it's going to be going to social media giants. And this also ties into another one of the idiotic things this government's doing with C-18, which is where they want to put the screws to Google and Meta and force them to pay companies to have links pop up on their thing. They're saying, oh, these companies won't go away. Really? They're laying off tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. You think you can bleed them for more money? You think they're going to put up with it? I don't think so. This is a battle you're going to lose, but you're going to hurt a lot of independent media when you have that battle. And yes, it's independent media like us. And I know it's self-serving. It's what we do here at the Standard, of course, but it's also for everybody else's sake. As we said, look at the gross misinformation that came out during the Convoy protests. The media embarrassed themselves. They really did. They so eagerly grasped on to misinformation about the Convoy. You could, I write columns all the time. I put my opinion out there. I make my case on things. And if I wanted to play devil's advocate, I supported the Convoy, but if I wanted to play devil's advocate and oppose it, I could have written a lot of pieces as to why that protest should be shut down and made a number of points. But I wouldn't, make things up. I wouldn't claim they had firearms. I wouldn't claim they had Russian funding. I wouldn't need to. Well, Roland says, okay, then book deal, eh? Well, Roland, clearly you're not writing a book anytime soon. So, yes, she's going to put out a book, and I guess we'll get to expand on and hear more about what happened there and everything. And, I guess, yes, she's written a book. That means she must be dishonest. I don't know. Let's see. Here's another thing. Yeah, Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland. We're not hearing much from Minister Tweak lately, but she's still back there. And she says, must close the growing income gap, is what she was told by Commons Finance Committee. This gets scary. And of course, the way they say to do it is to raise taxes. Well, if you're closing the income gap through taxes, in other words, we're talking about socialism. You're talking about ripping down the successful and bringing them to the level of the less successful, because you can't bring the less successful up, but we can. Socialism, again, is the equal distribution of poverty. And the Liberal government is more than happy to indulge in it. So that's what's been suggested by committee. It's going to be an interesting budget coming at the end of the month, if the Trudeau government's still standing at that point. Here's another beauty. Museums are too colonial and must educate Canadians on climate change, equity, diversity, inclusion. You know what? I won't go to your museums. I won't. It's garbage. It's crap. That's not what they're for. They're there to give us displays of history and things, whether it's the good history, the bad history. Take your colonial crap and stuff it somewhere deep and dark, you guys. This is garbage. But this is the whole report, renewal of the Canadian Museum Policy. Museums are a part of the colonial legacy. What the hell are you talking about? What are you talking about? Why? Because they document the time when Canada actually was being colonized. Colonialized. There's something else. Yeah, that note, I threw it on Twitter. I see it's in my head. I'm getting a colonoscopy next week. Something to look forward to. They won't let me live stream it, so you guys are all lucky enough. But maybe I'll give you some graphic descriptions of it later. But maybe that's part of those mispronunciations going on with things. Either way, this is bad. So Cabinet's ordered revisions to the 1990 Museum Policy. And they're going to be, I guess, decolonializing them. I'm not going to bother, and I'm sure a lot more people. It's the same as the mainstream media when they expose themselves as woke or biased or unreliable. People stop listening to them. And I tell you what, when you take all these museums and you turn them into this vanilla woke crap, people just won't go. And they'll fall to the wayside. And it's a joke. But I mean, we're in a joke in a lot of ways. Speaking again, the corruption, I'm going through my news scroll here. Trade Minister Mary Ng, you got to remember, she was already got in trouble, and Vashi Capello really held her to task in a fantastic interview. To give a credit mainstream when they do, because they have been doing great, with Global and Globe and Mail, at least on this Chinese communist thing. They've been hitting hard, and she will not comment now. This minister gave a plum contract to a friend, and when she got stung for it, I didn't realize I wasn't allowed to do that. Come on. You know what inside dealing is. But it turns out she won't comment on her association with a group, one parliamentary witness named as a Communist Party front. Yeah. Well, if you want your name cleared, let's have an inquiry, Ms. Ng. So here's the news item that Tamara mentioned a little bit. Yeah, there's a lawsuit going after the organizers of the protest, and they're going to try and seek at least $290 million in damages. I mean, this is just ambulance chasers. Roland thinks writing a book's a bad thing. Oh, whatever. You want to see the real parasites? Look at those class action lawyers that get out there. They smell a little money. But again, this is a blood from a stone thing. I don't know where they're going to get it from. Everything was seized. Everything was taken. There's no money to take. So I guess they just want to go after and try and bankrupt these people retroactively. A waste of time and effort. All right. Well, that kind of covers a lot of what I wanted to cover this week, guys. This was a good show. It was great to have Tamara in, like I said. Make sure, keep tuning in, guys. I'm going to have another good show next week. And we'll have the pipeline on tonight at 7 o'clock. We'll run down a few more of the big issues going on in Alberta and in Canada. And we'll see you all again next week.
The current Lethbridge feed grain prices are as follows. Cash barley is at $4.17, feed wheat is at $4.25, and corn is down $2 at $417 per ton. In the milling wheat markets, May Minneapolis futures added 1.5 cents at $8.51, with local hardwood spring bid for April movement at $10.91 per bushel. In the oilseeds, nearby canola futures are softer $3.40 at $754.20 per ton, with delivered values for April movement at $17.10 per bushel. In the pulse markets, nearby red lentil prices are trading at 32.5 cents per pound. Yellow peas remain at $12.50 per bushel. In the cattle markets, April live cattle are down 1.5 cents at $161.90 per hundredweight. I'm David Lee at Marketplace Commodities, accurate real-time marketing information and pricing options.
Canadian shootings.